Hi everyone, welcome to DASAR. We have an amazing podcast today. I have with me Indraneel Chitale. Welcome Indraneel.
Hi Darshan, good evening and pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. So let me do a quick round of introduction of what you can expect in this podcast. Indraneel Chitale is the fourth generation family business entrepreneur. We're going to talk about family business entrepreneurship. We are going to talk about digital transformation. We're going to talk about D2C brands. We're going to talk about how do you position the brand positioning, brand creation, distribution, and a whole lot of other things, including family business structure, ownership. So stay tuned. Feel free to, it's going to be a long podcast. I hope you're going to enjoy it. But let me introduce very quickly, Indraneel is the managing partner of Chitale Group, based out of Pune. If you ever think about one brand, if you've grown up in Pune, it is Chitale Group, right? For me personally, this brings back nostalgia, right? From my childhood, going back to Bishop's school days, to engineering days, to be able to celebrate family functions, to be able to celebrate all the lovely birthdays with sweets, the Bakarwadi. Even when I was traveling to Boston, studying at Babson, Bakarwadi was the first thing that I would pack when I'm traveling to Boston. So we're going to talk a whole lot of things, right, Indraneel? And one of the things that I want to first start with is the story. Yeah. Because it is such a powerful brand. It is a legacy. It is something which has touched the globe just based on very simple principles and some great but authentic food. So can you, just give us a quick overview of, how did Chitale Group start? How did the business start? And, your fourth generation. And so how has it transcended over the generations? Would love to quickly hear about it from your point of view.
Sure. I mean, that's an important part of why we exist today. So, it started in the year 1939. My great grandfather, late B.G. Chitale, started the company, and that time it was B.G. Chitale Dairies, as it was known as, and that is the brand name that still continues to exist for our milk business. So what he did was he started working out of a place called Bilaudi, that is on the banks of Krishna River in Sangli district. And this place he was something that he was sure about, or he bet on, is because it was having a railway line which was at time owned by the British Railways, but that connected Bilaudi to Mumbai, which was a big marketplace. And that ensured that whatever he was trying to make, or the milk products that he was producing, they could reach a marketplace like Mumbai and actually have a market or a potential to be sold. So he tried doing that as a B2B business, where this product was sold as a B2B product to other brands in Mumbai, and these brands sold it as their own product, sort of a white label activity in Mumbai. What used to be an issue is that this was an era where there was no telephony, forget internet, no electricity as well at that time in Bilaudi. So those were diesel fired electrical generators that used to exist. So keeping a control on what was happening in the market was something that he did not get an idea of, and he could not do because there was no system to do that. So very often he used to be cheated, and people used to complain that your product was not up to good, and they used to sell it and hive off all the profit and not give anything to him. So that's when he called his eldest son, late Bahusaheb Chitale, who was my grandfather's elder brother, to come in from, he was that time working in Gujarat as a mill worker, and he asked him that, you better come to Mumbai and start looking into this, because I can't keep attention in what's happening in Mumbai. So business continued, and they realized that Mumbai is not a great market to do business for a milk brand, because milk as a commodity is consumed mostly on a daily basis. The hotel business at that time was too small. So how do you target people where Mumbai has a huge migratory population and not a very stationary population at that time, and it was an expensive place to do business. So the next best alternative was Pune, and that's how we came to Pune. Pune was that time the Oxford of the East. People were here known as a pensioners paradise. So there was stagnant population here, which meant that was daily consumer. And what my grandfather believed was that a repeat consumer is when you actually make money, and you need to have repeat consumers, which Mumbai market didn't have. So that's how they made the switch to Pune, but they still continue doing a B2B brand. That's also around the time when my grandfather, late Rajabhau Chitale, joined the business. And what they tried to do was continue doing the B2B operations. But they eventually realized that it's always going to be an issue when digital systems were not there on how to manage quality and how to manage payments. So why don't we just make a brand of our own and start selling this? And that is when both these brothers were involved, and that's how Chitale Brothers as a business was coined pre-independence. And that continued to exist till some time even post-independence. And when the two younger brothers also joined, where Nana Sahib Chitale, who's 88 and still in Bilodi, Sangli, where our dairy plant is, and late Dattatreya Chitale, who passed away in 2020. So these four brothers were the ones who started the business, and that's how Chitale Bandhu as a identity came, because the brothers ran the business together. So we started with one store at Kunte Chowk in Pune. This was around 1947-48. Around mid 50s, we opened up a store in Deccan Gymkhana, and these two stores were what the brothers operated into. One of the key transitions that happened was in the mid 70s when my grandfather visited Japan as part of a delegation from Maratha Chamber. And there he saw that products were packaged and not sold loose. So that's when the idea struck that why don't we package milk in pouches and start selling pouched milk, because till then nobody was doing it in India. So this was all, of course, a different era. It was not liberalized, it was license Raj, and that machine took 4 years to import from France. So nonetheless, that machine finally came, and that just multiplied our volumes to a great extent, because we could package and sell milk to a larger number of people, which till then used to be in glass bottles. Second pivot happened around the same time when we got to know of a product called Bakarodi. So that's what we are known for today. But Bakarodi came into existence because we were exposed to this Gujarati product at that time, and my grandfather and his brothers were able to modify it to a way where that suited the Maharashtrian palate well. Where now Bakarodi, in spite of its Gujarati origins, is known as the pride of Pune, or it's a identity of Maharashtra, and we are proud we could create that identity. So these both moves were something that basically planted some sort of disruption at that time. It was limited to a scale, but it was disruptive. Because from say doing 300 kgs of Bakarwadi a day manually to a point where in my father's generation we progressed where we could do 300 kgs an hour, to as of today where we can do about 1500 kgs an hour. And that way, that was the scale that was built. And what happened was in the late 80s and 90s, when my father's generation took over, they realized that probably we have a market bigger than what we are doing through our stores and liquid milk. So let's start franchising. So 89 was when the first franchisee was given, which was way ahead of its time, because Pune at that time was like Amchi Shaka Kute nahi. Nobody wanted to franchise out or give products outside their own controlled avenue, and which is when we started franchising. And that turned out to be a great move, because Pune was expanding geographically, the horizons were expanding, and we could capture a great market out of it. With that, we also realized that you probably need to start working on how do we package the product, because with franchising and distances increasing, the demand was also increasing, and then we couldn't service that fresh. So that's when around mid 2000s is when my generation, Kedar, me, eventually Nikhil, Atul, Pushkar, all of them have taken up some role or the other in terms of how we can just package and distribute. Where the big pivot that happened in our generation from franchising was on the distribution side, where now we sell our product in multiple states in the country. We are able to export our product across the world on every possible continent. And while doing that, we've built omni-channel presence, where now our retail is not simply about the transaction that happens across the counter, but it's about ability to service customer throughout the day. So that's the story, and that's what 4 generations have been able to do, and that's the pivots that has kept us relevant.
Mind-boggling, right? And just what I see consistently in this are two things, right? One is tremendous innovation, and innovation comes with risks. These are innovations which succeeded. I'm sure there are a lot of innovations which failed, right? And the second part of it is longevity. The ability to survive from 1939 to 2022, it's almost a century, to be able to cater to different tastes, different types of business models, the different regulations, and then now digitization, right? And most important or the complex piece of it is the family complexities.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to touch upon that. We'll touch upon that a little bit later.
Sure.
I want to talk to you about innovation, because what I see today in the market is the binge bar. I see some great packaging. I see the same old taste of my bakarwadi, which is very dear to me, right? So retaining what has worked well and then some new innovations coming through. So maybe what you could do is today, how are you thinking about innovation? What are some of the innovations that you have rolled out recently? It could be product, business model, or otherwise. And so just would love to hear it from your point of view. How do you think about this when it comes to, what's happening around the world?
Well, so I think innovation is part of our DNA. I wouldn't say I am the only one innovating. Innovation happened at every generation and every step, which is why we have been able to have this longevity. I don't think so that could have happened, or we could have got this mantle had my forefathers not innovated. So I think that's ingrained into us as an organization, and that is why we are able to bring that kind of innovative ability onto the table. And by innovation, it can be across so many fields. It need not be restricted to simply about one domain. So, we can keep innovating in processes where, a commodity like milk, where, the purchase price and the selling price is so regulated by the government. And it's your innovation in ability to process milk where you are actually able to make money and build volume. If you're not innovating, you're never going to survive and be profitable. So that way, that's probably our DNA, which led us to keep innovating all the time and keep changing or pushing the envelope. So the recent innovations have been, one majorly has been about how we could package mithai, because nobody was doing that in the country. And when we wanted to expand into the distribution business, which was beyond our store, we wanted to create a choice which did not exist in the market. Because if I was just going to do Me Too products like any other brand which our competitors are doing, I would have either had to give more margins, which would have wiped out my profitability, or spend excessively high on marketing, which probably does not really materialize into anything concrete. So as a innovating factor, we also had to factor in that we need to maximize profitability while innovating. So how do we do that? Is where packaging mithai played an important role, because nobody was doing it. People were used to buying everything across the counter, and then we came up with the idea that Kaju Katli can be packaged, mango burfi can be packaged, where now there are 65 products that are packaged and sold across the world, not anymore restricted to a Chitale Bandhu store. So this could be done only because we innovated on the process and the parameters and the standardization and the automation and the innovation of it. So of course there was innovation on the business plan, there was innovation on the technology, there was innovation on the process side as well, and there was also innovation on the way the finances were managed, because we did it with very, very meager budgets. So because this was an unproven idea, so that built over a time where it was a seed that was sown. But then having that kind of mechanism of sowing seeds itself is a great organizational strength to have, which I genuinely enjoy in our organization, which is why we could do it. And then when we realized moving out, we realized that the ability of our brand to percolate into newer markets, where something like Northeast is much lesser than percolating into the West or South part, where we are known better. So we wanted to bring down our ticket price of buying the brand to a 10 rupee category, because that's a no commitment cost. People will pay 10 rupees without a thought. People will not pay 100 rupees without a thought. So how do we innovate at 10 rupees? Because we could just very well do aloo bhujia, or we could do wafers, and we could do something snacky, which is made in very bad oils, to be honest, and very not good for your health. Or we could innovate and change the form factor, give something baked in an industry which is fried, and just do it better and convenient. And that is where we try to do that. And it's been a series of efforts and multiple years of management and building that kind of R&D team where we are able to innovate. And where now I have reached a point where I have team members whose only job is to pinpoint on what they see wrong and try and fix that. So we have that check and balance mechanism internally itself, where whatever is a set process, can we challenge it? Can we better it? Can we modify it? And can we keep pushing the envelope ourselves without the need of external competition? is what we try to do, and we've been able to do that, which is why we fail very often, but then something comes out good, and part of it is what binge bar or package mithai would be.
Brilliant. So, you're an engineer by background,
Yeah.
and then you're an alumni of Harvard.
Yeah.
And
I'm
you
about to be a Harvard alumni, so my last course is still pending.
Yeah,
but
so
hopefully it should be.
I want to talk to you about that, because I see a massive challenge today, especially in second generation and third generation family business owners, where either they are not interested in the traditional business because it is boring, non-technology, and the second part of it is not having the capability to be able to take it forward. Now, these are two very different, one is mindset, one is skill set, right? Capability. So, would love to hear your own story where what made you join the family business? What point of life were you at? And how do you think about it, right? Because you could very well have said, you know what, I'm not interested in business, in doing this. I want to do, because you could do whatever you wanted to, very well educated, right? And you could be in US, Europe, anywhere you wanted to. So would love to hear your thoughts in terms of what is your story to be contributing to this family business legacy.
Well, so when I went to engineering, many people ask me that, "Arey, you're a mithai wala, why do you want to do engineering?" And it was a big question that I had an answer ready at that time. I told them that, we sell mithai, but we just do it very technically. And you should come see the factory once. Of course, we were ahead of time at that time. Now we are at a different level. And that's because of the formal education I could get. So, even before I went for engineering, I think as a family, everybody was convinced that I should be doing that because there was a place where I knew I would add value into the family business. And while doing that, I knew that this is the kind of technical skill I need to build because that there is a potential to build something. But if I'm not equipped to understand this, I'm of no use. So the thing is, that is where nepotism gets a big issue. So, you can very well be placed under the mantle. What do you do out of that mantle is in your hand, and my aim is to not fail at that. So whether I'm successful or not is a very different story, but I would say that I try not to fail.
That's a huge difference. I'm just going to stop you here before you move forward because I put together a 1-year postgraduate program in entrepreneurship at Flame University recently over the pandemic. And I have seen third generation, fourth generation family business entrepreneurs come in and come with a sense of entitlement, right? This is something that I am.
Yeah.
And so there is never a question of failing, right? It's a question of entitlement, which is very different. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that difference and then kind of continue in terms of, so why do a postgrad program? Why continue your education even today when you probably don't need to, right? So I'm trying to get into your mind because one of the focus areas of DASAR is peak performance and productivity. And that can only happen when you're chiseling. It's chiseling. It's the 98% is there, but you're chiseling to become in the top 1%. So would love to hear your thought process of this continuous learning, continuous checking, continuous development.
I guess I must credit this to my parents and my family. We never grew up in an environment where we were raised to be entitled. So we were always, flogged for not being up to the mark or, taken up seriously when we were not doing something right. And that way merit was what was built into us as a program, and not just me, everybody else around me. So there was never this option that, if you are not scoring, you're not getting anywhere, or if you're not doing this, then you're not getting this. So the idea of achieving was something that was built into us much younger than we could even realize we had a business that was big. So I think that could only happen because we had parents who were meritocratic, and probably also the fact that they had seen both sides of the story. So my father came in from a time where he's lived in a rented house and moved into his own house where now he owns a big house. My grandfather probably lived in multiple houses with relatives because they were too poor when he was getting educated, and eventually could afford his own house when he was probably maybe 35, 40. Must be 40. So in terms of that, we've seen these men struggle, also be it the women in the house, be it my grandmother who's put in great amounts of efforts in terms of working on the recipes and the standardization, and also a lot of women that we employ working on solving their issues, because workplaces were not really great at one time. They are getting better now. So same with my mother, or around me, be it my wife, be it my sister. We've been grown up in that environment where we've had to perform, and there was a reward to the performance. There was not a reward to your entitlement. So we never grew up entitled. And that was a great thing to have, because that way we knew that we are coming into a business which was already running and running successfully. So at day zero when I joined the business, I had zero value to add to it. So unless I could bring something onto the table, I was just one of the many. So how could I do that was where I started working onto, and that is where my engineering helped me, and that is where I probably contributed to a certain extent, where that helped me break ice with many of the employees, the managers, the second generation employees, and also the family members, in establishing that I could do something. So when I did something good, I was rewarded with something bigger. When that came to something bigger, it went on to something much bigger. And that eventually went on to a point where it was a factory. Then it went into a division, where it eventually went into a business, where that entire product line is something that we understand. So this was a grooming process that was probably not very well engineered, but ensured to encourage merit. So we went through it, and that is when I realized that probably I spent a lot of time at work, but now I don't have formal management education. I know engineering and I know how to manage people, but I don't know how to manage finance. How do I do it? Then that's where the meritocratic idea was that, and one probably some khunnas with my father, that I told him that if I go, I will educate at Harvard, otherwise I'm not going anywhere else. And I don't need formal education is what I told him that time. So you were like, I don't think so you can make it to Harvard. So that I took it upon myself that if I do it, I'll do it there. And I think that worked. So
brilliant. So this what you've said is such golden words for most family businesses. I'll share a quick story. I come from a background of chemical engineering and family business too. Yeah. I gave up after running about 3-4 years of family business back in 2011, and then I've been in tech entrepreneurship myself ever since. But it's not easy. It's not easy because there's such a high bar that is typically raised, which many people can't reach. And so there is either fear, there is capability issue, or there is entitlement. And so there are a lot of issues that kind of pop up internally within family and self. So just going back to that point, at what point did you join the family business, and what was the trigger point, or what motivated you to then say, okay, you know what, this is time? Did you work outside? Did you join directly? Would love to hear some more context.
I did spend some time working abroad. And then joined in 2012 formally. So after my engineering, I think I did spend time in my engineering doing projects inside the company, where multiple companies I was exposed to on, say, handling how installations are done, how certain PLCs to be programmed, or how one project could be executed. So I had some exposure, and I knew I wanted to join even before I entered engineering. But what I wanted to do was something that I found out after I joined the business. So I think 1 year, my father told me that, no matter what happens, you're not talking to anybody on the floor without asking me. So you can be on the floor, you can observe, but whatever it is, you talk to me, I will see what is to be done about it. But you don't have the authority to instruct anything. So that was one thing. And another thing would be that, my uncles took in great effort in, exposing me to outside businesses. So my father looked more into the operations part of the business. One of my uncle is very tech savvy, and he was the one who's been responsible for getting us into a digital revolution ahead of the curve. So he would take me to meetings even during college, and I have bunked college for that. And so that's where my parents supported me, that fine, go for a meeting, doesn't matter if you miss a lecture or something. And similarly, installations and other things, where negotiating with people abroad, or just getting the last drip of that contract done and executed properly, was something that I've learned from another uncle. But that way, all 3-4 of them have had an influence on me in terms of building me. And probably that synergy is where I try to give out a good enough output. I think I have a long way to go in comparison to what they've done. But that's just a good foundation to be on.
Great. So we've kind of covered a little bit in terms of the past, right? Now let's get to the present and the future. And I have seen you focus a lot of your efforts on two things. One is digital transformation, and second is branding or brand management. So we'll take the first one, which is digital transformation. This is a very traditional business. You make mithai, right? But this is technology enabled business. I mean, I visited the factory, completely blown away with the level of automation that you've got there. The kind of things that have been thought and put into detail are just mind blowing, right? And so, would love to hear the pre and the post situation of digital transformation, and where do you stand today, right, in terms of your business. So if any you could give any examples, that would be great.
So both things run hand in hand. I don't think so they are mutually exclusive as a activity. So if you're doing digital businesses and so we are in an age where you cannot be dependent on one channel for sale. And that is what we engineered without knowing this very well at that time, because we were having an idea that something like this could exist, something like this could exist. Let's try to put one foot into that door, one foot into that door. Eventually now it's shaping up well. But if you look at us today, Chitale Bandhu does sale in its own stores in Pune, which are 25. It has Chitale Express stores, which are 40, which are spread across Maharashtra and Goa. They will be 100 by the end of next year. We have our distribution channel, which is spread across 9 states. We are exporting to every continent that is habited. So we did export once to Antarctica, but that's just once because we have India has a research center there. So that way there are, and along with that, we have the fifth and the fastest growing channel, which is the digital or e-commerce channel, where be it our own websites or the logistics services like Flipkart or Zomato, or the e-commerce places like Amazon or Flipkart. All of these places are contributing to your sale, and naturally as a brand we have to be omni-channel in terms of our approach. But when we go omni-channel, the big challenge is that I don't have the visibility of my customer that I have in my stores, because I don't know who's buying my product. I know who's facilitating that trade because of my AI or digital transformation and last mile connectivity. But how do I get my consumer on board when I don't know who the consumer is where the need for digital transformation was felt, and where we moved to a point where right from the point where any liter of milk that will come into our plant to a point where any kg of product that is sold to our customer anywhere, we have an end-to-end traceability that's been built. So this traceability could be built because we invested heavily onto digital data logging and managing, which eventually became Industry 4.0, which that was not what was known about a decade and a half ago.
Correct.
That's just materialized. So we are also progressing with technology, but it's sometimes like Columbus for trying to find America. So we still haven't found America.
Invisible.
We are trying to be there, but it's a lot of mist. And that's the thing with technology. So when I was in college, we were being taught what 3G was going to be, because 4G was not in picture, and the world used to work on BlackBerry and 2G phones. So when I went to 4th year, when I was being taught 3G actually came. But in 3 years later, 4G was there, and engineering kids were learning for 3G only at that time.
Right.
So now 4G to 5G leap has been less than 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So we are squeezing the gap between next generation of technology, and that way, all of this is leading to a very fast adoption of digital technologies, which help making business streamline better, manufacture better, and also reach consumers in a better manner. And while doing that, we still don't know what is the end point of it. It is an exploratory activity which has to be ingrained as an activity or a mode of working in a business. So you can be selling mithai, or you can be selling shoes, or you can be selling services. If you are not digitally enabled, you are not going to be sustaining in the world that's coming tomorrow. And the big thing about this is that since we don't know who the consumer is, how do we reach the consumer and make them have the affinity towards the brand? And that is where the marketing plays an important role. So marketing can be at multiple fronts, right? So it can be about communicating what the brand stands for. It can be communicating how the packaging works. It can be communicating about what the brand does beyond the brand of making money. It can be about communicating the values and the people who work for the organization. And it can be communicating about the technology that the brand is trying to build. So all of this needs to reach the consumer in a manner which that translates into building brand equity. And then brand equity can now be translated or measured into any of these omni-channel formats that I mentioned before. So that's why if we are not having a uniform look and feel, if we are not having a uniform way of communication, if we are not having a uniform way of approaching our consumers, if we are not having a uniform way of dealing with our consumers who have a problem or a feedback or a suggestion for us, and all of that being having that integrity of being the same on every platform is something that our marketing has to ensure. So marketing and branding go hand in hand, and here is where you communicate the brand value through these channels, and that's where social media I think plays a huge role, and we try to leverage that as well.
So I'm seeing a lot of social media presence. I'm seeing a lot of positive vibes coming through, but at the same time, a lot of authentic stories, right? And it's just very nostalgic when I see that, right? And the second part of it that you mentioned on digital transformation is data, right? Capturing data, but using that data for decision making. Right, is something that I want to talk to you about. We recently did a podcast with Rohit Pandarkar. He's the head of data science at OLX Autos, right? And previously he was head of data science at Mahindra Group. And we had a fantastic podcast where he talked about, first is capturing the right data, having the right infrastructure to be able to capture this data for business leaders to actually make sense of it and to use it for their benefit. It seems to me you've already built out the whole infrastructure in terms of what you need. Maybe what you can do is help us understand how is it that you're using this digital transformation initiative that you've put together for some of the decisions that you may have taken. So do you have any examples? Would you mind sharing any of them?
Well, so we had data, which is why we realized that 65% of our sale in our stores is mithai and not namkeens, which is very much inverse to what most other brands do. So that's when I realized that our data is pointing something different. So why don't we start packaging namkeens, because we were not doing that and nobody else was doing that. And we did that, and we've grown in that business at more than 30% CAGR volumetrically for the last 4 or 5 years. So that was uncharted territory, and we would have never known had we not been looking at data.
Brilliant.
So I could bet myself onto this idea because I had data. So, as they say, you're as good as your data now. So, how good is your data is the question. And that's why having the mechanism to get data all the time from different interfaces plays a very important role. And that's where Industry 4.0 is making things easy.
Right. So, we've covered a lot of the past and the present. Let's talk about the future. Not many companies are privately owned and have a legacy of 4 generations reaching about 100 years, and almost every country that you can think of globally. It's a popular brand. We are seeing Indian consumer brands now reach out to the world and be successful. So now, what happens next? What comes next for you and Chitale Bandhu?
Couple of interesting trends that we observe now is that 60% of the world's population is going to be living in the cities. So that's a lot of people in very small areas, and that means that our traffic situation is not going to improve anything better. So that means that convenience is going to be a next big thing, and people will be wanting everything available in the minutest possible time because they will not be having too much time. So essentially, your marketplace is your phone, or your laptop, or your digital device that you are using, and that's probably we all are facing 3 to 4 hours of screen time every day, and I don't work in IT job still. So we have to be part of your screen, and we can't be part of your screen all the time, because if you're stuck in traffic, you're not going to go celebrate somebody's birthday or somebody's celebration or something like that. You're probably going to give that online and send bouquets and flowers and something like that. So wherever this kind of consumption is happening, we have to be present. And that means that we also probably have to move beyond celebration, and we have to be into a point where we are part of the consumption that is daily. Right. So that's why what we are building right now is, first we want to target the breakfast cereals, and what we want to see is that breakfast is the only meal that Indians are very likely going to have at home, because every other meal is eventually going to be outside, either in the office or in the commute or socializing, because per capita income is going up in the cities, and people are going to prefer having meals closer to where they work and not in the travel. So, with the kind of expenses that it is going to cost making hiring maids in the city itself is going to be very difficult. So we are betting that 60% population moves to the urban part, and if they move, they want food. So we want to feed them throughout the day. So not just during celebration, but at breakfast, at meals, at food, lunchtime, at snacking time, whatever it is, whenever you want to have food, it should be something that comes from Chitale, and that is what we are trying to build. And that's where the R&D, the innovation, and the channel development is happening.
So what are some of the top challenges? I'm sure you've faced a lot of challenges since 2012, right? Any particular challenge that kind of comes to the top of your mind where and how you were able to overcome it?
Well, so here's the thing. So, what were challenges at that time when I faced it? Now, when I look at it in hindsight, I don't look at it as a challenge. And, all of those challenges were something that have defined what I am today. And also in terms of me being convinced or having that kind of conviction that I want to prove this point.
Right.
So that way, when these challenges have come, I think I have also been tested, but I have also been forced to, as you said, chisel or just refine myself and be that precise with what I want to try and achieve and communicate that.
Right.
And that's where I think these challenges have helped me become who I am today. So they can be anywhere from internal shareholders, customers, perception, Marathi manus, and एक ते चार बंदा असलंच पाहिजे. So we got complaint when we started giving our stores open. Right. I was like, isn't this for customer service? And people are like, no, Marathi Asmita totally to me. But then we move beyond that. But then correct. I also realized over a period of time that very often when you're faced with challenges, you become very binary in nature. And at least that was the case with me, where I was like, it's either your point or my point, and I want to prove my point. I'm going to work hard for that. But then very often the impact of your challenges in a country like ours goes far beyond the economics and the balance sheet matrix of it. It's also the socio angle of it.
Correct.
And that takes time as a young person to understand. Probably I am even worse when it comes to understanding this. So this is something that has enlightened over the last 2 years, especially after COVID, where I've lost a lot of people I've known. And I have also come to realize that very often the emotional value is something that binds people to brands. And as a consumer brand, we have to keep retaining that emotional value, be it with our customers, be it with our suppliers, be it with our employees, be it all stakeholders who matter to the organization. So that way, that has also resonated in a way I end up taking decisions where it's not just the binary optics of the decision that does this achieve this, that, etc. But what are the ramifications and the the effects which are cascading beyond our line of sight that we have to study while taking decisions. And probably I take 2 decisions less, but I take those better than what I did before.
Which is great insight and awareness and reflection. I want to talk to you about your routines. Okay, you've been a high performer for a very, very long time. I have noticed the way you're able to articulate yourself, the way you're able to think about decision making, the way you're able to sense things, right? And all of that feeds into based on your routines, right? And so would love to hear, what are some of the top 2 or 3 routines that you follow week in, week out that has made who you are today?
Well, I think discipline is probably my biggest routine that I swear by, and I just work far better when I'm disciplined. So whenever I go indisciplined, even say like one empty day in my calendar, that is the worst day to have. So I would rather want to have that kind of visibility that 3 weeks down the line I have this meeting because I am prepared for that meeting. So that way, if I am disciplined and organized, it just works better. And that does not only matter in your workplace, but it matters in your life.
Absolutely.
So, last week there was this iPhone update where the alarm did not ring. And this happened 2 days, but I woke up 5 minutes later than the alarm, which is my snooze time. But I woke up at 5:15, where my regular alarm is at 5 a.m. in the morning. And I was like, why didn't it not ring? But the thing is that I could still continue with my 5:30 exercise routine, although I had to rush into it, because for last 10 years I've woken up at 5 a.m. So my body clock is used to the idea that around this time we have to wake up. So I woke up and I saw alarm didn't ring, but that didn't matter because that discipline is built into my body.
Right.
And that's when I realized that that's great. I think I felt nice about this fact that I have something to be proud of. But that way, that's what I've stuck to. And so I'm not a very sharp person, or I was never a very intelligent person. So I knew for a fact that if I have to achieve something, I have to work hard. Because I had known people who are genuinely gifted or brilliant or great achievers, and I was nothing like them. So I knew that if I had to be anywhere around them, I had to probably put in more effort, and which is where probably that discipline was ingrained. And I've seen my grandparents do it, my parents do it, where we are all early risers. So what's worked for me very well is that since I rise up early, I sleep early. So if I sleep early, I socialize less, and that means that I have less bad habits to deal with and less hangovers to deal with. And third thing that I've seen is that I just consume a lot of time now of my day trying to read or consume content. So part of this whole leadership thing is that it's about your ability to sense what is happening, and that sense does not come until you build your intuition, and your intuition cannot be built until you are tuning your body to be that intuitive.
Yep.
And that's your physical and your mental ability, I would say. And maybe I'm too novice at explaining this, but that means getting a feel means you have to study what's happening around you. So if you're just too involved into yourself and doing this, that, etc., you're not hearing other people. And if you're not hearing and not sensing the pulse of what your decision is going to make, or what your impacts are going to make, or what new innovation you want to create, you are probably going to end up in a wrong spot, and that's not a comfortable situation to be in as a business leader, because you are responsible for so many people behind you. So how do we make less mistakes is where all of these things happen, and that's where I think this whole thing is about that.
So you've talked about this, and this is what all DASAR is about. One of the guiding principles that we have at DASAR is we will not be outworked.
Yeah.
We will put in the work because we may not be the smartest, but we are going to be one of the most hardworking, disciplined people who will prioritize and go after it, right? And in all our courses, so we offer online courses on 3 areas, which is how do you be the best at what you do in your field of work, right? So that's performance. How can you be at peak fitness? And I want to talk to you about that. And the third one is how can you become financially independent? Because if you are financially independent, you can take on things which are much more meaningful to you, right? Think of it as escape velocity.
Yeah.
And so that in all of these 3 things, the base that I believe is consistency. Yeah. You just have to chip away, right? 3 workouts a week over 2 years, you're going to be extremely fit.
Absolutely.
It does not matter if you do 7 days of workout over just 2 months. The rest of the 10 months, you're going to be consuming sugar or you're going to be consuming something or the other. So, love that answer that you shared. Would love to hear your thoughts on your fitness routine. What is your typical fitness routine and how do you achieve consistency in it?
Well, first thing, I have a very expensive trainer who I work with. So that's just a lot of money spent. So if I'm spending that kind of money, what is my return on capital employed is what I look into. So if I'm not fit about it, then there's something genuinely wrong. So I look at it and I'm a penny pincher that way. That if I'm spending, I want that kind of return. But that way, that just makes me answerable. But beyond that, what I've realized is that I picked up a couple of injuries over a period because I've always been into sports. And while being into sports, because of the injuries that I picked up, I also, have had those 2 curves in my life where I was at my peak physical fitness, and all the 6 packs and everything that was mattered at that time when Hrithik Roshan was king, to a point where it went down for 6 months where I couldn't simply even move my arm because that's the injury I had. And that was a big mental trigger for me. I was like, this is not how it should be done. There is something genuinely wrong with this. And that's when I started looking into this, that, how do we just move beyond this? And that's when I also figured out that aesthetics don't really matter. It's your fitness that matters. So after my second injury, which was a freak biking accident, I realized that, now I'm just training with the best people. I'm not cutting corners and I'm just doing that. And I could recover from both of these injuries because I had a physical fitness which was beyond those 2 injury or those spans of recovery. So that just ingrained further. And another thing is that, and what's very toxic about Indian work mentality is that, in my family, many family members in my father's generation had a hypertension or blood pressure issue when they were my age. And this was something that was slightly glorified. They were they were working so hard, they had hypertension at 30. And I was like, no, I don't want to be slaves to medicine. that I don't want to be taking tablets at all, so I'm going to work hard, I'm not going to have bad habits, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't become a slave to the tablets. So what should I be doing? So first thing, obviously it was physical exercise, but secondly also working on your mental self, because eventually as you're aging and your decisions are also impacting far more than what you can see in front of you, your mental fitness needs to be far better, and that is what I have been working for the last 2-3 years. And I also had some personal instances in my life where I realized that I had mental fitness is equally important. So I work on both. I have two great coaches who work with me, and that's the thing, that in your life you have to be coached by good people who understand that, and you should be working with people who understand that sector well. So have mentors who teach you good things.
Correct.
So we have business coaches, we have India could not have won the World Cup without Gary Kirsten as a coach.
Correct.
And we are seeing what's happened over the last decade, that we've not had a great coach, and that's what's reflecting in the team. So if you want to be at peak performance, go work with great people around you and learn from the best, and try to keep that as a goal of your financial independence, that I'm going to make enough money that I can afford the best.
Correct.
And if you can do that, then I think your money matters get sorted.
The money pays for itself.
Money pays
and I love this part, right? Because at DASAR, for all the program participants, we just concluded the first cohort of Get Financial Freedom.
Yeah.
These are people who are running businesses. These are people who have working at Microsoft for 10 years, who have joined a personal finance management program, right? They have all the knowledge. You have YouTube videos. You have all the books that are there.
Yeah.
The difference was, Darshan, thanks for hand-holding me and being a coach. I sincerely believe, you have a fitness coach, you have a mental fitness coach or an executive coach, but you also need to have a personal finance coach, because we need that hand-holding. The difference between a coach and a mentor, right, if I may just add over here, is a coach works with you hand in hand.
Yeah.
Whereas a mentor points in the direction and helps you reflect.
Correct.
There is value in it, but there's different from a coach, right? And so if you want to build a habit, you need to bring on coaches, right?
Absolutely.
And that is what we are trying to do at DASAR, and I couldn't have explained it better myself. So that's fitness routines. We have two speakers. We have someone who's called, who runs a startup called I Thrive by Mugdha Pradhan. So she is a nutritionist who's undergone medical conditions in her 30s and has launched a coaching for managing nutrition so that you live a healthy life.
Absolutely.
Using Indian food, right? We get a lot of nutrition stuff on Western food.
Very Western.
But what about Indian food?
Yeah.
And she's doing this. She's raised some funding, doing some really good work. And the second one is Shahjahan Samuel. Now, Shahjahan Samuel is a runner. He's an executive who works at a job and 10 years ago started running, and today on an average does a few 100 kilometers of running each week.
Wow.
Right? And just brilliant. We're going to have him, we're going to speak to him and just decode, what is it that they do, because they also have the pressure of family, they have the pressure of a job, they have the pressure of money. We all face the same challenges. We have the same 7 days, 24 hours. But you have to make time for your fitness, right? And so that is something that we wanted to bring in. And if you, after running this business, still get up at 5:30 and do your fitness, I don't think anyone else has any other excuse not to do it, right?
So here's my take on this, that you're making a great amount of money trying to run a business, and people are making good monies nowadays. So I don't think so there's any disparity in that front. So what's all that money going to contribute to if you're not able to utilize them in your older years and get those experiences? Are those supposed to float your hospital bills, or do you want to enjoy experiences? And I think that answer is all you need to find. If whenever you find it in your life, I think that will be a eureka moment, and you'll just go ahead doing that.
Brilliant.
So it doesn't come, you can explain all the logic to it, but even with me, I have seen that, you need that eureka moment, that realization led to this. So that moment will come at different point or phases in different people's life, but whenever it comes, I think they should act.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have one last question, all right, and this is a question on governance and this is the family business ownership
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
So when I was part of my family business, one of the things, mistakes that we did, reflecting on it today, and most SMEs, most small businesses that are coming from India are facing this, is they don't know how to structure and how to absorb family members into the business, have a very clear performance metrics, reward, compensation. It all gets mixed very easily. And then from a governance standpoint, is something that I've been studying over the last 10 years, that most small businesses aren't able to put together a governance structure to keep the owners accountable. Right? So any thoughts, experiences of how you are thinking about it, because you have multiple family members joining in. So maybe you can help us understand how do you approach it? How have you thought about this?
So one of the very, very important part that I probably found out much earlier in my life, and I'm glad I could, was that, we are not owners. We are just caretakers of a legacy that existed far before I came into the picture, or I was even born. And, it needs to be existing far after I'm gone. So I am just a small span in a lifetime which is far, far bigger than what we can envisage, and we want it to be anything that never ends. So when we are caretakers of it, we need to be answerable to the fact that we need to build systems and institutionalize it in a manner where the hand-holding happens, that the transition to the next generation is smooth. And while doing that, whatever the next generation inherits is better than what we as the current generation inherited. Because if we are not doing that, then we are actually landing a shit show into somebody else's hand, and these people would not want to own up to that. So how do we keep improving is a continual process. I don't think so there is an overnight answer to it. But while doing that, I think if this is not established at day zero, businesses are going to fail, and they are not going to sustain the test of time, for the simple reason that the mindset of sustenance is not built into it. And very often we have, so in India we've always had a patriarchal look at businesses, but now with families getting nuclear, that patriarchal value has also gone for a toss. And very often we have also seen that very around us in the papers, that the patriarchs are also not equally capable of being the patriarchs. So they can be the oldest but not essentially the patriarchs. And this reflects across industries, not just manufacturing or IT, but it's also in politics. So how do we institutionalize is a big question. And Indians historically have a problem that we are grown up in a society which is Raja and Praja.
Correct.
So there always needs to be one face at the top and everybody below them. And that is not how that's going to be institutionalized, because what happens when that face goes?
Correct.
So which is why I think all key stakeholders need to agree that we are not the inheritors, we are the caretakers of a legacy far beyond us, and this legacy is what needs to be preserved and handed over in very, very soft golden gloves to the next generation. And by handing over, what I'm saying is not about handing over the ownership, but handing over the caretaking activity of that establishment. So the ownership can remain owners or shareholders or non-active executive members, or completely CEO material, based on whatever they interest or whatever the family decides to be. But we need to understand that your ownership and your executive abilities are two very separate things, and it can be family controlled, it cannot be family controlled, and either ways are okay. But that's where the family needs to sit down, agree upon a way where that functioning is penned down, and that is standardized where it is functioning or functionable beyond the person. So systems need to be built which are independent of people and accommodate people. When systems are built by people to control other people, then that becomes a colonial mindset, and that does not sustain. So that's why we have to institutionalize from day zero, and that's what most new businesses need to do as first generation as well, because now the way capital is being raised and way acquisitions are happening and way structuring and debt funding and equity funding is being happening, you're losing equity in first round also coming down to 20%.
Correct.
So how are you going to retain your equity? And that's also a big question about how other investors are going to look at you, that if your shareholding is 20%, are we going to trust you because you can run away? So that way it's all about balancing all of these aspects and looking far beyond what you can think about. And when I say far beyond, I cannot put a definite timeline, but that is what you have to look into and try to envisage when things start building out one by one. and steps are taken towards achieving that longevity, because businesses have to survive far beyond you as well.
Yeah, and time, right? That so here's a famous quote, right? The first generation builds it, second generation grows it, third generation blows it.
Yeah.
That's the common theme in family businesses. However, in India, I don't have research to prove this, but what I'm noticing is the life cycle of the business is going hand in hand with the life cycle of the owner. And most of these owners are in their late 70s or early 80s, and the business, there is no caretaker, there is no legacy, there is no existence. As far as the startup mindset goes, well, it's really just in a very definite span of time, right? It's not necessarily being looked at from, am I going to be alive in 3020, right?
So here's the thing, right? Indian system or the Hindu culture has taught us the idea of ashrams, that you have the the Vanaprastha ashram, you have the Gruhastha ashram, you have the Sannyashram, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the first one.
Right.
But that is about education. But your businesses also go in the cyclic manner. And there is a very, very easy word that has been said, that the moment your kids are able to fit into your shoe size, you should start treating them like friends rather than just kids. And that way, that whole succession planning is so well defined in Hindu culture. Unfortunately it was never written down, and that is why it has never been institutionalized. But that is what needs to be taught, because as a society, we have figured this out. We are just not implementing this. But the Vanaprastha ashram is that when the kids are old enough to go to college, that is when the grandparents should take a back seat and let the son or the next mid generation run the show.
Yeah.
And by the time that transitions further and the next generation joins in, you should take sannyas. So I'm not saying go to a forest and be a hermit, but that means that you should take a step out of the business.
Right.
So I would want to inculcate that as part of how I want to grow old. But while doing that, I also want to ensure that this does not become a cyclic family holding thing. The holding and the ownership remain cyclic, but probably the governance and the aspects of running the business can be much more professionalized.
Yeah.
But we have a lot to learn amidst ourselves, I would say.
Yeah. Amazing. So we are at the end of this podcast. We've covered a whole range of topics, right? Indraneel has walked us through what is a fourth generation family business with a great brand, with a great legacy, and how does he view it? What is branding? What is digital transformation? How do you work on your strengths? How do you look at regret minimization framework? What are the decision-making models? What are the fitness routines? What are some peak performance routines followed by him? This is such a rich conversation, and I'm just grateful. Thanks a lot for coming on this podcast. This has been an awesome podcast. There's so much to learn. I hope we can continue this conversation going forward. But then if you guys need to reach out to us. We'll be very happy to connect to move this forward. I'm at dd@dasar.in. How can people reach out to you?
Twitter is the easiest thing. So
Twitter is the easiest way. So what's your
C Indraneel is my
Twitter handle?
So C for Chitale. That's it.
All right. Awesome. So thanks a lot. Thanks, Indraneel. This has been an awesome podcast, and I'll see you in the next time. Thanks.